All right, man. We're recording.
We're fucking doing the damn thing
Yeah.
out here.
So, where'd you go? Where'd you go for lunch? Let me guess.
Oh, my favorite place in the world, the BK Lounge.
Yeah, there you go. Really stepping it up around here. Um.
Don't fix what ain't broken.
So yeah, I want to talk about a few things going on in the drone world.
Cool. What you got?
Well, interestingly enough, I actually want to talk. Kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about like counter UAS. I actually think like counter UAS is kind of an interesting thing because no one's really regulating it. Number one,
No,
which is kind of scary.
it's not even a thought.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. I want to bring up this article real quick. It's kind of neat. So there's this company, Defend, and they announced this Enforce Air 2. And I'll just read basically using radio frequency technologies, the counter UAS cyber SDR hardware can detect drones up to 4.5 kilometers away and then execute mitigation measures such as disconnecting the target drone from its pilot and then landing the drone remotely. So essentially they can basically just take over your drone and fly it, land it, and pretty much own it at that point. Obviously, these things are designed for military, right? I mean,
right.
But
the technology is getting there. How do we protect ourselves from a personal standpoint?
Right.
Anyone creating this technology.
I mean, you've heard stories of, like people shooting. You know what I mean? Like unloading their shotgun. You know what I mean?
Don't fly on my property. That kind of thing.
So,
but the fact that I think it's a flyaway at that point.
Yeah.
And it turns out.
Well, you would have a lost link, right? So whatever your emergency procedures are for lost link, because they're basically taking over your link.
Right. Now,
so now you're having to, you as the 107 pilot, you're having to report to the NTSB, the FAA, whatever the reporting protocols are, because you lost your drone.
Right.
I'm not saying I don't even know if these are going to be available commercially. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but the technology is reversible. Anybody.
Well, that's the thing. So I mean, obviously, there's a company building it. There's multiple companies building them.
Mm-hmm.
What's to say that someone isn't going to come out with some open source, print this on a 3D printer,
right?
Program this on a USB drive, boom, you got this thing. It's just something to think about. It's kind of interesting. So,
yeah, I mean, from a consumer standpoint, depending on warranties that you have, you'd be protected against flyaways, and that's exactly what it would seem like. So, from my perspective, if that were to happen, I wouldn't know any better, and I would report it, and then contact my warranty company and replace the drone.
Yeah.
But
now, what do you do if that drone is then used later? They took control of it. It's registered to you. I mean, I don't know. There's just a lot of things to figure out. Yeah. It's the same reason you lose a handgun.
Right.
There's a reporting procedure to, hey, I don't have this anymore. So if it's later used in a crime, you're not held liable. They're not coming and knocking on your door, like,
and that comes like, immediately report it.
Right.
As fast as you can, obviously, because the last thing you want is, say I'm at an event and doing my recordings, and that were to happen, and then they purposely crash it into a car. Well, my business is liable now.
Yeah.
And things like that. So, yeah, I could see.
Yeah. So these guys,
bad, good for different military applications and such.
I mean, look at what these guys are doing too. So they got RF jammers, they got kinetic solutions. So obviously kinetic, we're meaning like some kind of munition of sorts to shoot it down. They've got lasers, the giant
lasers.
GNS.
Q Austin Powers.
GNS spoofing. Obviously tricking the GPS systems to fly, or grounded or whatever, RF-based cyber takeovers. And then this one's interesting. This one in the middle here, this EMP pulsing. Do we really want EMPs in the hands of people? Let's just fire off this EMP real quick. I don't know. Obviously, they're defense contractor. They're primarily designed for DoD. I just think it's kind of interesting. I think it's stuff we have to kind of look at. Also, a lot of what we see, or at least what we've seen, post GWAP, post Global War on Terrorism, a lot of those MRAPs and different vehicles are now being used. They were developed for the DoD. They're now being used by law enforcement.
Right.
So is law enforcement going to have this capability? And if so, do we really need remote ID? If they can just take over your drone, land it, and then come talk to you.
I'm curious to see where this all plays out especially with remote ID being such a problem now.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
I don't see-
if you thought that's controversial,
right,
you know,
right.
this is obviously even greater. So
I on the topic of remote ID, I personally don't have a problem with it, but I'm also not trying to hide anything.
yeah,
I'm also a business owner, so there's different aspects on who remote ID will affect, how, and why.
right.
Um, like for instance, they just used just found out they used remote ID for the 2023 Super Bowl to put on the light show. They put up X amount of drones into the air to display the Super Bowl symbol and the two teams that were playing right above the stadium for everyone around the stadium, the city to see. That was kind of cool. And it's just one of those applications. They're using it in scale, and everyone there's aware. Everyone there activates it. In a situation like that, you're going to want to know where everyone is at, where they're standing, when you're coordinating that many people to fly that
Yeah.
many drones and put on a show like that. Then remote ID is helpful. But again, who, what, and why.
So I'm glad, it's kind of interesting you mentioned that. So for viewers out there that don't know, any NFL event, NHL event, NBA, NCAA, NASCAR, and there may be a few others. You might want to look at the FAA website, but basically those are restricted from drone operations. So that's above and beyond the normal flight restrictions that a Part 107 pilot has. There's a separate application process to obtain a waiver. So guys and gals, if you're out there trying to, hey, I'm going to go fly over this this
what's going on.
maybe WNBA isn't a big deal.
Yeah, no, nobody's really.
There's only like 10 people in the just kind of making jokes. But yeah, basically, make sure you go through the proper procedures.
Get your waivers, get your liability.
Yeah. Don't put yourself in, because generally speaking, what they do is they have a blanket TFR, which is a temporary flight restriction, and so those will kind of pop up. So they don't want manned aircraft or unmanned. They don't want anything flying over these venues.
There's just so many people there, and so many.
There's so many people, and like you said, there's tons of stuff that can go wrong. We've seen it recently, and I think we already talked about it offline. But basically, we had the air show over at Selfridge Air Force Base in Michigan.
Yep.
And a guy had to punch out. Actually, it's two guys, right? It's a tandem seated aircraft. Historical like fighter aircraft. Something went wrong mechanically, is from what I understand. I don't know all the details, but they had to punch out. Luckily, the airplane that crashed, it crashed into a apartment building and a car, neither of which were occupied, and everyone survived, which is wonderful. Only minor injuries from the people that had to eject. So, I mean, basically, my point is these things happen all the time. These are people who are there to participate in the event. Last year, we saw the same thing with another historic aircraft down in Texas, where two aircraft did a mid-air collision over in Dallas, roughly this time last year. So, anyways, just keep that in the foresight.
Yeah, right here. Just this is reported by CBS Detroit. Former Selfridge commander breaks down the investigation of jet that crashed at Thunder over Michigan Air Show. Doug Slocum, a fighter pilot of 30 years, former wing commander at Selfridge Air National Guard Base, said that the plane crashed near the Waverly on the Lake Apartment complex in Belleville and struck several unoccupied vehicles at the apartment complex. The damage is immense.
Yeah,
But,
I imagine. Yeah, there was I saw some amateur videos, huge plume of, big mushroom cloud of black smoke and fire and everything else. So it was a very lucky situation. Now, obviously, your small, commercially available DJI drone is not going to do that much damage. No. But I can tell you the repercussions are the same.
Oh yeah, whether you nick it or even if you get in line of sight and you cause that panic for a split second and you get reported. That's all you need.
Yeah, well, that's actually I never even thought about that. But you're talking about the panic, like it's illegal it's illegal to yell fire in a crowded building for that same reason, right?
It doesn't have to be an incident. There doesn't have to be a crash or casualties. If the pilot cites that there was a drone and they decide to write a report, which they will, they're carrying cargo people, whatever they're carrying, of varying values. If they say something, then
Yeah.
The FAA is going to get involved, and it's not hard, especially with remote ID. And that's another thing.
Assuming people are compliant with it.
Assuming people are compliant
You know.
with it. Exactly. It did say to wrap the investigation up, and NTSB confirms pilot of the MiG-23 and the backseater are in stable condition. No one at the airshow or apartment complex was injured in the crash.
Yeah. Yeah. So another lucky situation there. But yeah, I just think it's something to keep in mind for sure. So I think I want to kind of shift focus a little bit. I want to actually go into some technology. We're just going to read a couple articles. We're going to go through a couple articles and see how it kind of goes. But basically, if you look at this, the Dragonfly drone. So Dragonfly will help. They're saying that they're going to help put out Canada's wildfires. So obviously, for anyone following the news right now, Canada's had a bad year for wildfires. It's really impacting me here in Michigan because I like to breathe clean air. You know what I mean? And you guys are really screwing us over there. Our gay cousins to the north. So
yeah, it impacts me because all my photos that I take for my business are all hazy now.
Yeah. So you guys better start tightening it up there. Yeah. So I'll just read this real quick. Dragonfly will support emergency services in carrying out nighttime missions, determining fire line breaches and locating hidden hotspots throughout the use of thermal imaging.
Nice.
So the company's services will augment firefighting operations, increasing protection and critical infrastructure. So obviously, I want to talk about this a little bit just from my perspective, being kind of formally in that unmanned aerial, or not unmanned, but aerial firefighting world for the better part of 4 years. Basically, typically, there's some waivers now. There's some people operating under night vision goggles like we do in the military.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, it's a dusk till dawn type of scenario for the aerial assets to be firefighting. Now, keep in mind, aerial assets, we don't put fires out.
Mm-hmm.
It's the guys on the ground that do it. We just aid and assist, and we hopefully prevent the fire from spreading into other areas.
Right.
That's what we're doing. We're putting down fire lines, just like they dig fire lines. We're putting down retardant lines or water to, number one, cool it so they can actually go in there and fight it a little bit better and get closer to it. And then the fire retardant lines are to hopefully prevent it from spreading.
Steer it
in a certain direction, against the winds or whatever.
Protect and stop.
Lot of hocus pocus stuff going on there that I don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
But what I can say is, from a dusk to dawn scenario, I always kind of thought there's no eyes in the sky after that, and they're kind of smart. So this Dragonfly is doing it for Canada. We knew as both being part of Zephyr Systems. We put a bid in on a contract, or we were going to. We decided not to go. But U.S. Forest Service is looking for drone operators now, contracts for that. Same concept, super cheap to fly a drone, thermal imaging camera on there.
Yep.
You can fly it, loiter it for a long period of time.
You can get more information quicker and with less resources with a drone.
And you can see how it's spread throughout. You can see out through which direction is it going. Yep. Okay, based on that, the winds are supposed to shift here. So you can formulate a better plan in the morning to really hit it hot and heavy. Just kind of interesting, kind of some neat technology. That's kind of my tech corner, sound bite, if you will. I think it's a really good use case.
Oh yeah.
Showing that drones do have a place in the commercial aviation world.
More so than just pressure washing houses,
right? Or like
what IT-30 up there washing some windows, and everyone thinks that's cool. I'm like, I feel like that's a waste of money, though.
Like the number one
you
thing.
Can put it to uses like this.
The number one thing that everyone thinks about, at least for me, I think about drone. I think about realty.
Yep.
That's where you see it used the most.
And that's the first question I get asked too when I say I do drone photography and videography. They say, "Oh, what realtor do you work with?" None. Not had any successful exploits with realtors. Really picky.